Welcome to Job Tales, the show where we find out about various professions from around the world. Each week I speak to a new guest with a very interesting job. If you want to know more about the job of a kinesiologist, then stay tuned on this episode and listen to Jutta Holzapfel. Jutta, welcome to my show. I am glad to have you as my guest. I haven't yet interviewed a kinesiologist. I would like to start by explaining what a kinesiologist is.
Okay, so kinesiology is a energy balancing modality of the body. It was developed by chiropractors that had knowledge of, say, the Chinese medicine, of acupressure therapy, of various stress release methods. And somehow they discovered, which is the kinesiologist's main tool, muscle testing. So through muscle testing, or muscle monitoring, we also call it. Okay. So through that, you gain information from the body. So kinesiology is, it's grounded in the study of anatomy and physiology, and it is a communication tool to enable a practitioner to access the client's neurology and in that way access the body and assist them to, for example, in their ability to recover, in their ability to heal or to increase their energy. So it's an energetic health science, I want to say.
Energetic health science. So osteopathy being limited to what? To the study of the body and, actually putting pressure on some points, and I believe also there's some cracking
is similar.
Involved.
Yeah, not so much cracking. So
not so much.
So we use this tool of first to find out where is the imbalance. We look at the body as having different aspects, like it's got a physical aspect, an emotional aspect, a mental aspect, energetic. Okay. It's influenced by the environment. And we work from the presumption that the body is self-healing and self-regulating. And that it does that generally very well.
Very well. Mm-hmm.
Yet sometimes, like, it can't recover properly. And then, it allows us to figure out a little bit where in the system of the person is the imbalance and how can we increase their ability to recuperate. And that could be anything from some stress release methods or from using, for example, we use barometers where we look for certain emotions, whether they're conscious or subconscious. It might be an emotional release, or maybe we find there's a nutritional imbalance, and we use the same system of the muscle testing to find the correction of how to increase recuperation energy.
With the energy level. So did you study osteopathy?
I didn't study osteopathy. I only studied kinesiology. So there is kinesiology is also called, in South Africa, we call it like kinesiology, like specialized kinesiology. And in America, where most of the modalities kind of were developed in the 60s, they call it applied kinesiology.
Okay. So it is a university study? It's a discipline that you can choose when you go to university?
I don't think it's a university study.
Okay.
I think it's specifically kinesiology. So there are certain entry modalities. One of them is called Touch for Health. So Touch for Health is a modality that can stand on its own, but is also the entry modality to study other kinesiology methods. I think in different countries, there's different requirements. Like I know, for example, in Australia, you will get a college. I know in the UK, you get kinesiology colleges where you can study that specifically, and you have to basically do anatomy and physiology, like a basic anatomy physiology course, but not on a kind of medical level.
I see.
So we find things in the body, but we're actually not allowed to diagnose, for example. We're not allowed to
Ah,
say like, oh, because it's
okay.
not, it's an energy medicine and not like a medical branch in that
Like
sense.
a classical medical study. Yeah, okay. So someone who will come to you is someone who knows about kinesiology, or does
Yes,
it? Because it's very interesting. I'm thinking maybe next time I should go to kinesiologist, right?
yes, yeah,
And
try one
but
out.
how do I know? And like at what point do I need a kinesiologist? For what kind of problems? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Or
Yes, can be any of that. So I see a whole range of people. So often, because it's also called an alternative modality, like often people have quite an aversion in a way to the medical world that see me, but not only, but often.
Mhm.
So there's, and in my understanding, it would be helpful to use anything that works for you.
Yeah.
Right. So often people come and say like, oh, like just give me like a tune up, or they come, for example, with a specific goal. So we have ways of, for example, making a goal specific session. That would mean like, for example, Laura comes and she says like, oh my God, I can't sleep at night. Like, I don't know, I have menopause and like I'm waking up at 3 in the morning. So we could say our
Mhm.
goal is to sleep better. And then we
I
would
see.
look where in the system can we support you to be better
Okay. Okay.
at reaching that goal. And that could be anything like from, wanting to excel at your studies, or so that would be then a goal specific balance. Or otherwise, it's just like have a look what shows up. So we always start with what we call pre-tests, and in those we generally find something like that could be okay. Now we need to do an emotional release, or it could be the person is very dehydrated. Let me have them drink some water.
What kind of test do
Yeah,
you perform to understand that?
it is really just this muscle testing. So I would take your arm or your leg or your hand. And with, for example, we have specific parts of the body that we touch, which we would call alarm points that give us access to the meridian system, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So if I would be testing, for example, your lung meridian, I would touch that alarm point, and then by putting light pressure on your hand, for example, it will or lock and stay like locked in a strong, or it will just flop down. So
I
this is
see.
like how we get the reading from the body by unlock and an unlock of that muscle. And
Okay. So physical presence is needed for you to do a sort of like a your own diagnosis in a way, although you cannot do diagnosis, but sort of like understanding what
yes,
the issue
but to
is.
just see, yeah, where is the imbalance? Where we strange enough, people use a lot of surrogate sessions, like where but I prefer having the body.
Okay.
Or if I work online, I might be testing on myself just to see what is coming up for this client, and then together with them do or the correction or the balance or the emotional release or the breathing exercise, or sometimes we gather information to understand better what we're dealing with, and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you know that that's what you wanted to do? I mean, what did you even know kinesiology existed?
No, I actually didn't, not at all. And I came to it probably about 15 years ago, and I'm now like in my early 60s. I've had interest in like alternative medicines or things like qigong or yeah, similar like
Yeah.
movement therapy, for example. And I actually was feeling very unwell at a certain point, and I knew a friend of mine was a kinesiologist, and I just thought like, okay, let me just try out and have a session.
Ah, okay.
And then I was just very intrigued by how I felt before and how I felt afterwards,
So it really
and it
resonated with you.
fascinated me. Yeah, it resonated. I could feel physically and emotionally a really big change, and also the things that showed up in the session and that we touched upon and talked about really just completely made sense. And initially, I wasn't really thinking I would end up working as a kinesiologist. At the time, I had relative small children, and I thought, like, well, if I do the introduction course, I can help myself and help them a little
Mm,
bit with
okay.
supporting them on their way. And I had no intention actually to ever become a kinesiologist at
Uh-huh.
that point. So I did that entry.
What were you doing before professionally?
Okay, so I also worked as a performer.
Okay.
I worked for about 20 years as a performance artist, like a street performer or site specific theater.
Okay.
And I had also stumbled across that actually in a very unplanned way and out of the blue. At the time, I was actually printing. I was printing t-shirts and fabrics and clothes, and with a group of people, we lived in Amsterdam at the time. We had a co-op shop,
Okay.
and we would do these fashion shows or these kind of open evenings to kind of show all the things the various people were making. And because I was printing fabrics, I thought, like, well, how can I show them nicely in a big way? And as a child, I was a gymnast, and I knew about being on stilts, the stilts, the wooden legs where you're
Yeah.
just a little bit taller. And I thought, oh, that would be a very nice way of like holding up the big fabrics so that they're visible.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine, when she saw that, she was actually a puppeteer, and a fire dancer, and she said to me, "Oh, why don't we make a children's play?" And I thought, like, okay, that seems like a nice idea. And we wrote this play about rubbish, really rubbish in the cities,
Okay.
and I made this kind of rubbish monster on stilts. And even then, it was just like a playful thing to not really think of like this is now a professional choice I'm making. I then became fascinated of how people respond to like archetypal like creatures, like a monster or a witch and things like that. And from there, yeah, I made another stilt character and actually worked like that for almost 20 years.
Wow, amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
So from that, then you did kinesiologist, and you needed to study for how long to become a kinesiologist?
It's an ongoing study, actually. So, when the Touch for Health training, which, as I told you, I just thought I'm doing for me and for us,
Mm.
that was a 40-hour workshop. And in South Africa, you always, at the end of it, you have to kind of pass a small exam, and then you get the certificate or not. And
Certificate.
I
Okay.
knew I wanted to continue, but I also didn't feel really that I was equipped to like work with people.
Okay.
So the requirement in South Africa, and I'm not sure about other countries, is that before you can charge and before you can become part of the association, you have to have about 500 hours of workshop training.
Oh, okay.
And
That's quite a bit.
that takes quite a while. I think it took me about 2 years. So then you have work
Mm.
like other modalities in kinesiology that you can take these courses, and they're anything from like 24 workshop hours to about 72. And before you can become registered, you need this amount of hours. And then there's also a requirement to have continuous yearly education. I think it's only about 25 yearly hours to be allowed to stay with that
Mm.
kinesiology organization
The organization.
in South
Okay. So
Africa. And I'm not sure how it works in other countries, really. I know, for example, in Russia, the kinesiologists work very closely with the medical people and actually in hospital.
I see.
But
Mm,
here it's very much, yeah. If you
in
Google
the
it online, you will read about it being like a pseudoscience that is like based in based in nothing.
So
So
that, yeah,
yeah,
because that is my question would be like, is there a complementarity
yeah.
with doctors? Like, do they recommend or prescribe, for example, say, okay, go see a kinesiologist because it could do you good. It complements with what I'm doing with you.
Some doctors do. Some doctors do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Often they're also homeopathic doctors or integrative medicine doctors. They're a lot more open than, say, your doctor at the hospital. But definitely, they
Okay.
are in South Africa, not a majority, but definitely there. And I think
Okay.
it's always somebody who knows the modality and has also experienced it themselves and seen benefit.
What are the kind of criteria, in terms of personality? Like, who do you think would excel at this job? Like, is it done? Is it made for someone who has specific characteristics?
I think in
It
a
could be
way you
anything.
have to like people and find them interesting
Hmm. Okay.
and have a kind of
People's
a
person.
like a curiosity, be a people's person, have a curiosity, but also have a yeah, like maybe the intimacy of the sessions. They can be quite long. They can be like 60, 90 minutes long. It's not short, like say if you go
Yeah.
to the doctor.
Right. And can you do it full time? Like, is it a job that you can make your living from?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Okay.
And then also because you will run your own business, it also depends on, I mean, some of my colleagues have a lot more work than
Yeah.
I do, for example, but I like my free time. I like I volunteer, like other work, social work on some levels that then allows me to, do that
Hmm.
and not
So you do
not
it
be
part time.
dependent.
Yeah.
So I have some days that I work and some days that I try and keep free
Mhm.
for
Okay.
doing the other things.
So you are definitely a people's person because also before we started the interview, you told me that you do also work with patients and people who are at the end of their lives. So you accompany them towards
Yes,
these
yes,
last moments. Or and can you tell me more about this?
yes. So it's called an end of life companion or an end of life doula. And the idea of death I have always found quite intriguing, like in a way terrifying, but also there's a curiosity about it.
Hmm.
And I knew that these end of life doulas, they're also sometimes referred to, or yeah, companions exist. And during lockdown, I actually really started wondering if my work was gonna completely crash and people would have less money and it would be less affordable to
I
see
see.
me. And also, I think with COVID, we all became much more aware of our mortality.
Yeah, that's true.
And because I did have this kind of curiosity, I found out that now it was possible to do this training online, which I
Hmm.
think wasn't really an option before. So again, you can either train to be an end of life companion, or maybe you
Mm.
are again socially kind of conscious and you volunteer at hospices or at kindergartens. So I found this amazing woman who is based in Johannesburg that had offered that course.
Okay.
And I had decided to just follow the interest without necessarily knowing like where will I land with it, like is this for me or is this again just to be of assistance within my family. And the interest was also piqued by some of my clients were really ill that came to see me for kinesiology sessions.
Yeah.
And I felt a little bit out of my depth in terms of dealing with a like stage 4 cancer, or
Mm.
the actual trauma work that requires. And I then decided I would just upgrade my skill a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and partially also in a preparation, I imagine, for my own death. And then in my
Okay.
training, I found out that end of life could be anything that profoundly changes your life, like a diagnosis
Mm.
or like going on pension or a divorce. It's not necessarily
Ah,
that the
it's not
person
endless
is about to die.
to die. Okay.
It
That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's also encompasses those little deaths, in
Okay. End
life
of a
where we just
chapter.
like reach that. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Part of you kind of dies, but then part of you stays. Or a new you.
yes, yes,
Mm.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
So
something
there's a lot
like
of
that. So
psychology behind that, right? That you need to
yes,
develop. Okay.
yes. And then again, I wasn't sure whether, I actually am made for that. And during lockdown, I tried to get some internships or volunteer in some of the hospitals, but that was still very restricted at the
Mm.
time because of the whole, health
Yeah.
scare.
Did
Yeah,
you
I kind
manage
of went
to?
ahead anyway. I eventually managed only this year. So I just finished the study and there and then I was wondering where I wanted to apply myself. I thought I would like to support people who possibly choose to stay at home or die at home to be a support
Okay.
for the person and the family,
So if
or
someone,
just as a yeah.
yeah, so sorry, I was gonna ask if someone wants to study what you did. Can you just Google end of life companion
Yes,
studies and then do it online
yes,
or yeah? Okay.
yes, yes. Or depending where they live, I would always recommend if somebody lives near you and offers that and you gel with them, because it is wonderful to have a real mentor, or especially I
Mm.
think in the end of life work, because you might be working with a hospice and with a doctor and with the nurses and with a family. You're almost like a in between person that has this extra time wherever that's necessary to
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. For sure.
and that might be dealing with the kids that are going wild, or making some tea, or it has many aspects. And
Yeah. For
depending,
sure.
it's completely guided by the person
With a
themselves
pen.
and their
Okay.
wishes. You can
Well, how would you recommend some young woman or man who was listening, to enter this line of
yes,
work?
who want to enter that line of one, what would I recommend to them? Where to start, or what?
Yeah, where to start and what to do, how to get started.
Yeah, I would again like Google what is available in my city that I live. Is there actually somebody who offers training, or in the city you live in? Meet them, speak to them, see if that is interesting enough for you to follow through. What are the requirements? Because I think there's a really big variety from quite extensive courses that require reading and then writing like essays about it, and then writing exams, to very
Yeah.
short term courses.
Hmm. Okay. So,
Yeah.
because it also seems that it's not too long of a course, a study life. So if you don't like, you don't enjoy studying for long years, maybe
Yes.
this is also could be something
Yes.
for you.
That could be. Yeah, that
Yeah.
could be good. Yes.
Yeah. Put into straight
And
into
then for
practice and
myself, yes, exactly. and to link up to something, to maybe or a hospice, or some people work by themselves. Like we are a loose group of end of life companions in
Mm-hmm.
Cape Town, for example, and we all took the training with a wonderful woman priest separately from the lady I talked to you about before,
Mm-hmm.
that had actually set up this group as a support for each other. Also, so we can, you have somebody to speak to and bounce things. But some of them, for example, work voluntarily, just like one day at the hospice. Some of
Mm.
them make podcasts like you do. One of my colleagues, he makes a podcast, How to Die, and he
Mm.
basically interviews all kinds of interesting people around like death and dying and
I see.
funeral
That's
parlor
very helpful.
people, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
but most
Fascinating.
of us like to, yeah, sorry, I keep interrupting you,
No,
you're
I was
bad.
gonna say it was the time. I see the time is running, but it's very
Yes,
fascinating, and it's a very honorable job. It's very pro people, and to help really understand and go through very important and difficult parts and times of your life, and sometimes
yeah,
ending your
yeah,
life. So from kinesiology to end of life companionship, it's a very commendable and recommendable jobs. And so I'm happy to have met you, to understand, have a little glimpse of this, because we really didn't touch on much. But it's
yeah,
to know, to show people it exists. Go out there and Google it, and find more about it. And yeah, if you have maybe some links, I can also put them in the description of the podcast, for others to understand
yes,
more
yes,
what it
yes,
is about. Yeah. So yeah, I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
thank you
I
for
will
this.
send you some, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for your time. And if we
Yes,
have, yeah, if we have other things to say, then we will have another episode for sure.
fantastic. Well, thank you, Laura, for making the space available. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
That was Jutta Holzapfel, Kinesiologist. You will find more episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcast, as well as any of your favorite players. I'm always looking for new guests, so please send me ideas to jobtalespodcast@gmail.com. See you next week for a new episode of Job Tales.